So for this exercise, we're going to be working on hinging mechanics and trying to get our gluteal muscles to fire while keeping that upper body extension. So what we're going to do is a really simple squat. Now when we do our squats, what we want to think about is making sure that our feet are hip width apart to start. We don't want them shoulder width apart and we don't want them too close. So making sure that our feet are hip width apart is going to be the first step. The second step is going to be watching where my knees track as I go through this position. Now when we think about squat, typically we think about what's considered an Asian squat or a third world squat, where people kind of come like this and they just go, and they go all the way down and they come all the way up. What we want to think about with this is more of a hinge than that type of squat. And the reason why is because we want to limit the amount of forward movement of the knees. And when we get into that third world squat, we have to get a lot of forward movement of the knees. So with this, we want to really think more about trying to keep our knees and ankles where they are and just hinging backwards. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my feet hip width apart, and then from there, I'm going to think about trying to sit my butt back almost as if I was going to sit in a seat. Now the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to put all of our weight on our heels. We want to think around a 60-40 to 75-35 split, a little bit more weight on the heel on the back side, but we still want to keep enough weight on the front side so that our toes aren't coming up. And if we need to, we could very easily lift our heels up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hinge back just until I start to feel that littlest bit of engagement in my glutes. So it's just going to be the tiniest little bit of firing. It's not going to be a full firing. And the reason why is because we're going to couple this with a little bit of overhead movement. So what I'm going to do, I start out like this, feet hip width apart. Then I'm going to raise my arms up. Now I want to think about raising my arms up without letting my chest collapse backwards. So what does that mean? I want to make sure that I keep my hips shifted back ever so slightly, almost like I'm about to go into that hinge. Yeah. So if this is my normal standing posture, or this is my normal standing posture, I want to think about setting my hips back just the tiniest touch. That way my hips and my ribs are in alignment. And once I have my hips and my ribs in alignment, I'm going to slowly start to track my arms up, making sure that I keep my palms facing each other. What's going to want to happen is as we get higher up, we're going to want to start to open our hands up, and it's just because we don't have that full range of motion. So we want to start to challenge that. We only want to bring our hands up as much as we can keep that control of having the palms both facing forward and having both the arms extended as opposed to being bent. So once I find where that's going to be for myself, it might be here, it might be here, it might be here. But I want to make sure that I can still keep all of those checkpoints connected. Once I find that for myself, I'm going to challenge it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise my hands up, and as I start to get my hands up to where there's that, it's a little bit difficult to get them any higher, I'm going to want to either pitch back and compensate or lift to compensate. I want to try to limit both of those. And the reason I want to limit both of those is because both of those are going to cause my neck to start to compress more. So if we want to work on thoracic extension, we have to think not just about our thorax, right, our chest area, we have to think about our head as well. So as I come up through this, when I get to that point of resistance, I'm going to think about trying to let my pelvis drop back ever so slightly more and lift through the back of my head. Now I'm in that starting position. Once I go to here, next I'm going to hinge and try to challenge holding this. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to take that little bit of hinge, and as I take that hinge, the load on my hands is going to become a little bit more intense. So what I'm going to do is as I start to hinge, I'm going to really think about trying to drive through my glutes and extend through my neck to lift my arms the littlest bit more. Now, as you can see, my arms are still in that connected position, but the reason that they lifted a little bit more is because I'm training my glutes to start to allow my scapulas to rotate a little bit more by getting my back muscles to engage properly. So when we get into this position, we really want to think about trying to find those key checkpoints. Are my palms facing each other? Are my elbows straight? Are my shoulders up in my ears, right? Finding that position where we can still track properly. Once we get into that position, we'll take our hinge just enough to start to get our glutes to fire. And then we're going to use our gluteal engagement to start to lift up through our chest while lengthening through our head. And what this is going to look like from the side, just so you guys can kind of see, if I go into this hinge this way, and I start to get my hands up overhead, and right through here, you can start to see I get that little bit of compression in my neck. I want to use my gluteal engagement to limit the amount of compression in my neck that I have, and then from there, I want to use my breath to challenge the movement of my arms. If I'm doing this properly, in most cases, I'll feel a stretch right through here, and that's called the latissimus dorsi muscle. So we really want to emphasize with this proper form over the actual range of motion. And I want you to think more about what it feels like than what it looks like.